I had I was thinking maybe I could create like a segment because last stream we talked about Hogwarts Legacy and about but I didn't really like the conversation because it wasn't that productive. But I would like to talk about boycott in general as maybe a segment. And because I watched this video by Anarch. If you don't know Anarch, and I'll recommend to you Anarch, who wrote, no, he didn't write it, but he made a video on boycotting. And I found it super interesting and thought provoking. Are boycotts effective? And I'll show it to you now. And we'll talk about boycotts because I think it's an interesting and a fascinating. Here, the role of the boycott. I mostly agree with like watch the video, but I fully agree with what he says. So he says he disagrees with the strategy of boycotts as I do, and very often he talks he links it to like this a very liberal strategy of individualizing social problems, which I also agree with. He does, however, he does something that I don't necessarily agree with. It's like a small gripe, but he does a distinction between individual boycott and social boycott, which I think is it's if there is a distinction between both, and I want to know your opinions on that. If there is such a thing as an individual and a social boycott, because he says that social boycotts they are organized and individual boycotts aren't. But I think every individual boycott is part of a more organized, wider boycott. And if it's not organized centrally, it's more loosely decentralized. Let's say you individually boycott Amazon, right? It's not part of a social boycott in a way, then in the sense that you're not part of a movement with a hashtag and everything. But there is a couple of people that are boycotting Amazon in general, and you could call it that like a movement, but like a more decentralized movement, right? So I feel like this distinction between social and individual boycott isn't that relevant because the effects of both are pretty much the same. I think a social boycott, if in its organization, to use Anarch's terms, can be more effective, but not because it's a social boycott, but just because it's more directed, I feel. And he does underline that the ideas of having precise goals with a precise message. But again, when you boycott, let's say Amazon individually from your own home without necessarily participating in a larger movement, you still have goals and you still have, like you have very clearly defined ends. But the kind of boycotts I want to talk about are local boycotts, because I think that those are the ones that work the most. Because boycotts are, as I said, more like individualizing problems, like that liberal tendency of individualizing problems. So when you're boycotting Amazon, or you're boycotting Hogwarts Legacy, or you're boycotting a larger corporation or like a international corporation, like your individuality doesn't matter, and deluding yourself in the fact that it matters and that your consumption choices do matter is irrelevant at best and harmful at worst. So, but it can work locally, and Anarch also talks about that. And I wanted to use an anecdote. When I grew up in a city with the most horses per capita in my province, and that city had 2 grocery stores, one of which sold horse meat. And people started boycotting the store that sold horse meat. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. Horse meat, cow meat, whatever. It's the same process. It's the same, I imagine. But people really cared about horses because it was part of their culture, and they were mad that this grocery store sold horses, and people would boycott that store just for that. And that store ended up closing doors. It might have been because of other variables, but at least in the broader social conversation, it was because of the horses, because of the horse meat scandal. And not only did that close the store that was selling horse meat, but it also motivated or disincentivized the current or the remaining grocery store to sell horse meat, right? So not only are you actually helping to, like, actually you're contributing to the horse meat sale to like disappear, but you're also ensuring that it never comes back, because now there's an incentive to not have horse meat anymore. And I feel like when on a local level, that can be extremely powerful. And I think someone brought up, for example, the Montgomery bus boycott seemed to work. And that's an example of local boycott. And I feel like local boycott, if there is a distinction between boycotts, I think it's not an individual versus a social boycott. I think it's a local versus international boycott, I guess. A local boycott is more effective and can be a source of a lot more cohesion socially. So, for example, the Montgomery bus boycott is a local example. I'm assuming, because I haven't done as much I haven't done research in Montgomery bus boycott, but it also creates this cohesion, right, between people feeling the same indignation or feeling or sharing the same experience, right? And that cohesion is part of creating class consciousness. Not only sharing your experience, but being able to identify it with other people and have other people identify with it just by seeing other people taking action on it. Yeah, Luke Taylor says, when I boycott, I don't really conceptualize it as organized because I see it as a vote with your wallet kind of behavior. I'm not necessarily talking with anyone else about it. But see, that's the liberal criticism, or like the criticism of it being liberal, that, vote with your wallet is, I don't think that's necessarily like the greatest way, because one of the downsides of boycotts and vote with your wallet and all that, and has been clearly underlined by the whole Hogwarts legacy situation, right? Where you put moral weight on people's economic decisions and consumption decisions, which alienates a lot of people from making those decisions, right? And alienates people from the movement. And I think that, individualizing those problems, saying that, oh, you're contributing to the transphobia of J.K. Rowling, or you're contributing to the human rights abuse of Coca-Cola or Nestle, like, is not the greatest way to go about it, because you're trying to guilt people into joining your movement, which I don't think is the greatest way of introducing people to your movement, right? You might, like, I think it's much better to say, yeah, it's like Nestle products, like Kit Kats are great, but did you know that Nestle does terrible things? Is it in South America or Africa? Or Coca-Cola death squads or whatever? You can talk about that without trying to guilt trip people into their consumer habits, and saying, yeah, you can still eat Kit Kats, because not buying a Kit Kat is not going to affect Nestle at all. Obviously not. But being aware of it, I feel like having just the awareness is already important. Yeah, Kelton says, and Kelton Grayson, and that's true, when everything is now large corporations, local boycotts have little effects. I understand that. I do think they still have effects, but it is true that it's becoming less and less the case. For example, the grocery store was part of a big grocery store chain, and they closed it. The one with the horses there, it was part of a big grocery store chain, and they closed it, right? And that did work, but when it comes to, like, I don't know, clothes or electronics or stuff like that, people can just, you can maybe close at best, your local Best Buy, I guess, but people are still gonna just turn to Amazon in that case. So how better is that? So yeah, there is a criticism there that is completely worth it. Large corporations that have their effect everywhere, not just locally, but Yeah, Joseph Anino says saying vote with your wallet shows how much a society is controlled by corporations outside the scope of democracy. Absolutely. I think it's if vote for your wallet is still is a good thing, it's only to show that not only is it your wallet is becoming more of a power, it's more of a power than your vote in itself, but also that people with more money on their wallets have more power than you. So vote for your wallet in that case is powerful, at least in showing that. Boycotts work similarly to capitalism. Sometimes you get a good individual result or two, but mostly it's just people pretending not to be chewed by the maw of the beast, says Alec Georgiak. Yeah, for sure. It can feel good, and I won't stop someone from boycotting. If they want, they can, obviously, but it's at best trying to not participate, but try not participate is very hard. Yeah, Joseph Anino again. The myth is a good way to make people think they don't need to organize. I think boycotts can be a good way to organize, especially locally, if you want to organize something on a more regional level, because you need to get with other people to create that movement. But if it's online and it's for a very broad goal, like for Hogwarts Legacy, then yeah, I think it might be a way to think that you're actually doing something without actually doing something. PP the Hamster says, so we understand boycotting Hogwarts is just like what Rosa Parks did. The two are equal? No, the two are not equal. And I think one of the reasons why is because one was highly organized and local. The other was a bunch of people on Twitter saying we should boycott a game that was going to be one of the highest selling game in the world or in history. Flamingo, yeah, asking for a Discord. Eventually, I promise.